Welcome everyone to the first session this year of our Digging Deeper sessions, where we take a specific topic that is common to all of our performance assessments and look at them a little bit closer. And we love to feature programs around the state who have some real good handles on the topic. And you have we have Northern, Central, and Southern California represented today, and it was some really big bag of resources for you. So thank you, Xavier, who is going to be showing the PowerPoint for us. Today is about acceptable supports for the CalTPA and the CalAPA candidates, and we'll give you the materials folder in just a minute. Introducing who's here for the day. From the commission, Cassandra Henderson and myself, who are both, the next slide, are both here from the commission. And our email are right there in case you have questions for either one of us. And then we didn't have a slide, but we still love you greatly, is our evaluation system support, Xavier Webb, who is joining us and running our PowerPoint slides. So thank you for being with us. We have 3 guest speakers, as I alluded to before. They are in the next slide. The folders come first. We go to the next slide and we'll come back to this one, Xavier. There you go. So our guest speakers, we have, and just ironically, they're all county office representations today. The first one, Joe Baffa from Riverside County Office of Education.
Hey, Joe.
And he is, you even have your own fan club, Joe. And he's going to be talking about the CalTPA general education. Marissa Luna Lopez is joining us from the Merced County Office of Education. And she's going to be commenting both on CalAPA GenEd with some focus slides also on EdSpecialist CalTPA. And then finally, Melody Thorson, whom we lovingly call Mel, from the Placer County Office of Education. I'm not hearing any other shout outs. And she's going to be looking at CalAPA as well. Then back to that slide, and we'll answer Raymond Hurst's question. Can we get this stuff? We have developed a folder of all of the resources. So this PowerPoint plus all of their materials are in the Google Drive. That hopefully this link will send you there. Xavier has thankfully put it into our chat. If you can grab it from there, you can pull up a PDF of the PowerPoint or different slides, as well as the acceptable supports. And if you'd open the one that says acceptable supports, there's a version for CalAPA and a version for CalTPA. They are essentially the same. There's just a few wording errors. So when we talk about the different bullets, you should be able to follow along no matter which one that you are using for your own individual program. So let us know if you have any trouble opening that. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and move on. So we're going to start with the negative. We're looking at the one-sheeter. You'll see that there are some required supports. There are some acceptable supports. And then there are some unacceptable supports. So Cassandra and I thought we'd take over the unacceptable ones and get the negatives out of the way. So we're going to start at the bottom of the page. Then we're going to flip to the top of the page for the requireds, and then finally finish in the middle. So let's begin with the unacceptable supports. Cassandra, I've walked all over your slides. I apologize. I don't know which one of us is supposed to have this one.
This is APA.
Okay, thank you. Unacceptable supports. So the first one bullet there is providing content or answers in response to a CalAPA prompt or a task, or a TPA prompt or a task. So you cannot go to the specifics and teach them or insert answers for them. So an example of this in cycle 1 would be, you can't help them choose data sources to investigate. You cannot analyze the data that they bring to you. That has to be them demonstrating those skills. If you're doing cycle 2, which talks about leading community of practice. You cannot do things like drawing conclusions from the data that they bring you on the implementation of their strategy. And if you're in cycle 3, you cannot have determine who the candidate should be observing for the coaching cycle.
And for CalTPA, cycle 1, there are lots of ways to provide unacceptable support and content or answers, but some examples are cycle 1, helping candidates select video clips, or cycle 2, directing them in the series of lessons they should teach or how to implement those lesson plans. For Ed Specialist, some examples are selecting ELD goals in cycle 1, or telling the candidate what to select there. And then for cycle 2, selecting the formal assessment instruments or assisting in the analysis of those instruments.
The fourth, thou shalt not, is you cannot become an editor. So you'll see him with his little red pen in there, but a big no across the top. You cannot do these things. Not things like using a red pencil to say you can or cannot put that text in. You cannot remove things. You can't change their verb conjugations even. Don't even suggest moving the text around. And you really cannot replace any wording. So you are the guide on the side and not the say on the stage with this. For the next one, we threw in a little bit from everybody from GenEd APA and EdSpCalTPA. If they are asking what they're going to, perhaps they're going to do. So conjecturing on what it's asking for. Things that you might say regarding performance requirements. Well, perhaps they're asking you to do, no. A couple of other things, expectations. They expect you to do this, and this, alter or include or choose. Or finally, you cannot conjecture on what is a sufficient evidence. 2 years of data from that instrument seems reasonable to add. No. Or if you should not use this because you'd only score a 1 if you did that. So all of these things where you're providing answers are still no's. And then finally, using institutional terms and definitions, substituting for those that are used in the CalAPA. And we're missing our examples here, or are they another click, Xavier? There you go. So a CalAPA term that we use is quantitative or qualitative data. You cannot insert numbers data for quantitative or word analysis for qualitative data. In cycle 2, they talk about problems of practice. So you cannot say bad instruction. That's not a good substitute for them. And for the teachers, California standards for the teaching profession, please use that reference. Don't instead, you have them use teacher guidelines of practice or something like that. So stick to the terms of the CalAPA. We have a glossary and we should use it.
Similarly for CalTPA or EdSpCalTPA, the terms used in the guides are learning goals. And so you don't want to use terms like outcomes or learning targets. Formal assessment is what's used in the guide. Please don't use terms like final assessment or summative assessment. And we call the scores they receive scores, rubric scores, not grades. So you want to be careful about using the terms that are in the guides. And we have just talked about the unacceptable supports. Now I'm going to turn it over to our guests to talk about the required supports, the must-dos.
Okay, welcome everyone. Glad to see you all. I'm happy to be here today to talk about the CalAPA. So as we take a look at some of the must-dos that we do when it comes to the APA, we are absolutely responsible for ensuring that they have the preparation materials. And so, we've created at our county office, we have a model in our learning management system for each of the cycles where we house the assessment guide, some support tools, the glossary, any items that would be of use and access to them as they're preparing for the cycle. We even put the templates in there so they can at least look at them, even though we know they can download them from the ePearson system themselves. We use those all as instructional tools. We do a walkthrough of each of the modules in our orientation, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But just walking them through, helping them know exactly where to locate that information so that that's not one of the obstacles they're facing as they prepare to complete one of the cycles. We also do a document walkthrough with the assessment guide. It's so interesting that we have this great resource and folks forget that they need to access and utilize that resource as they're preparing and developing their cycles. So we do a document walkthrough. We talk about all the different parts and steps, but we also take them through the rubrics, the glossary, and we pay attention to those teal boxes in the assessment guide. We spend some time also talking about the verbs that are used in the rubric, really helping them understand the difference between describe, analyze, all of those key verbs so that they can get to the depth of understanding and depth of development that they need to while working on one of the cycles. We also take them through a whole series of how to use on the support materials. We've created a lot of support materials and tools for them to use, but just giving them to them doesn't seem to be enough. So we actually walk them through on how to use each of the tools so they can select the ones that work best for their work on one of the cycles. We give them obviously an overview of the CTC exams CalAPA site. We take them to the site, we walk through all the links, we show them where they can find all the important information like submission dates and if they need to resubmit, all of those, the video, hints and tricks and whatnot. We walk them through so that they become very familiar with the CTC exam site. We try to avoid some of the hiccups that come with registration. We actually have our candidates register for their first cycle as a whole group at one of our orientations. And then weekly, I put out a newsletter that has a segment or a section in it. Our newsletter is called the Past News and Info, and I highlight a key thing for them to consider, to review, or to investigate when it comes to the current cycle we're working on, so that we can make sure that everyone is honing in and focusing on what they need to for a particular piece of the cycle. So those, the link there, there's a sample of my newsletter there. Next slide, please. And then as far as explaining the CalAPA, we actually dedicate a whole afternoon of our orientation at the very, very beginning of our past program to walking them through the CalAPA. For some, all they've ever heard is the acronym. And so we really try to give them an understanding of the 3 focus as well as duration of time and the level of understanding they'll need to have to complete the cycle. So I've linked there that segment of my orientation slide deck so you can see the types of things that we go over with the candidates right on that very first day in June when they come to their first time together, their first meeting together. And then as well, we do ours a little differently in Placer County. We actually have designated time built into our program for the 3 cycles. So I have an overview session that we go back, we revisit, we walk through things again, and I take them step by step what the expectation is of each cycle. Those are the 3 slide decks of my overview sessions that I work with the candidates. And then the way we set up our learning management system, we have a actually CalAPA course. That course is dedicated then to each of the 3 cycles so that they have all materials, all resources, and all information that they need to finish the cycle. And then I offer weekly office hours where they can meet with me. We can go over something very specific on any of the questions so that they really feel like they understand the rubrics as well as the purpose and the intent of the cycles.
Thank you, Melody. That was excellent. So I am Dr. Joe Baffa, and I'm going to give you kind of an overview. I've brought a lot of resources, I'll get to in the session later on. but it's a pleasure for me to be here to assist you with guiding new teachers through the CalTPA. I had the privilege of wearing not one, but two CalTPA hats the past few years. I taught the CalTPA courses at Cal State San Bernardino. And I also had the pleasure of working, I also have the pleasure of working at the Riverside County Office of Ed in the School of Education for the Center of Teacher Innovation. And I do love my work. And we had the daunting task of assisting all the new teachers on the governor's waiver to complete their CalTPA while they were navigating induction. And fortunately, we were led by the fabulous Dr. Melissa Metz Hall, who was instrumental in organizing and leading this charge, and also helped by a shout out to Beth Roybal, some amazing people there. The candidates were encouraged to do their CalTPA and their RECA, for that matter, as an inquiry cycle. And so we tried to be as user-friendly as we could, feeding two birds with one scone, if you will. So in working with both candidates in induction and students, I found that oftentimes I was more a psychologist than a college professor. This is a mental lift for everybody, and it can be very, very stressful. So you want to set them up right away to understand why they're doing it, first of all, and what it is, and then encourage that positive mindset. You really want to build camaraderie. We'll talk about that a little bit too. You want to have some fun together, make sure they get a chance to laugh together, have a few giggles before you pair them up. Highly recommend you have a pair or a triad so they can check each other's work and give each other detailed feedback where we can only be general. You know, that can be by grade level, subject area. That's your call, and maybe even let it be organic, let them figure it out. But I'm a firm believer in promoting appreciative inquiry. Find out what they're doing well, and let's build on that. I'm sure there's a lot of areas they're lacking, but you want them to be successful, feel successful. And even through happiness studies, they say if you want to be a happy person, you should act like one. So they are going to be teachers. We need them to be teachers now. The very best thing I found to do with my students, and this sounds awkward, but is sit down and read it with them. I could tell them to read the guide 20 times, and then each time you come back, they don't have questions. There's no specifics, and really you've made no progress because either they read it or they just read it in the wrong mode. You know, they're not reading for detail. They're not reading for tasks. It truly helps if you can break it down together. And that for feedback from my students, those were the most successful classes and where they made the most progress. And in talking to folks like Beth Roybal and other people I respect and highly regard, the biggest problem they seem to have is they don't read the stuff. So if you can make them, you know, sit down with them, maybe even make it some fun, I highly recommend that if you have that time. I did add some exemplars in my stuff. They found that that was highly effective. And there are a few embedded in the resources for you when we dig deeper. And I would remind them, we're not just here for the TPA. We need you to be a better teacher. Those kiddos you're leading, they only get 1 year of second grade or whatever it is you're after. And so we can't wait around for you to be a good teacher. And that's the beauty of our induction program at RCOE. It is geared to them. So they make their own choices, and we ask them to choose what is going to make them a better teacher faster. I'll get into some other details on all this. I don't want to take too much time here, but just there's some different ways to approach that teaching cycle. Some call it activate, acquire, apply, and assess, prepare, present, apply, and evaluate, anchor, add, apply, and away. We kind of go with plan, teach, reflect, and apply. Plan, teach, reflect, and apply. They should know that cycle. They should know how it works, and they should know that is what they are doing. But no matter what you call it, it becomes a feedback loop, and it leads to continuous improvement. You know, Harvard University says the fastest way for new teachers to improve their practice is to video and watch it, and then, you know. So you have the opportunity to not just help them attack the TPA. You also have the ability and the opportunity to help them become a better teacher fast. They don't have that 10,000 hours that Gladwell talks about. So I will leave it there. And again, I will check back with more resources in a bit. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marissa Luna Lopez, and I'm here with Merced County Office of Education. And the required support I'm going to be covering in this slide has to do with permission to film. And oftentimes this can be a challenge, especially when working with students with disabilities and parents who are very concerned about their children being captured in a video, and they don't know where the video is going or who's going to be watching this video. But it is a required piece of our memorandum of understanding, or MOU, or partnership with districts, that it allows for candidates to be able to record themselves. As Dr. Boffa said before in the last slide, it's so important for candidates to see themselves. And it's been a major transition, and one that came in with the pandemic, where we were using a lot more video mentorship rather than in-person mentorship. But I feel like it's been a very positive piece where candidates are able to watch themselves, get comfortable with video, know how they sound when they are on video. But the challenge of having parents sign permission slips or waivers is not something that is to be taken lightly. We had one candidate that it was in a program that I was working with before, and we had to have a parent meeting where parents came in the evening and discussed what this was and why the students were being filmed. And still half the class of the teacher didn't want to give the waiver to have kiddos sign to be on video, so they had to position the camera in a space where you could only see the kiddos who had signed permission. So I did include a permission to film letter that we've generated here at MCOE to support that permission slip, because a lot of times parents just they want to know what this is, why we're doing it, and what does this mean for my little guy in being in this recording. So it's very important that we do ensure that students in their clinic, or candidates in their clinical practice, whether they be an intern or a resident or a traditional pathway, that they have that permission that's verified to have students appear on video.
Apologies, couldn't find my mute button. Rookie error. So number 5 is engaging candidates' informative experiences to know students, getting to know the students, and then that self-assessment and the video instruction. And I do have resources for all of this for you. But the process begins with excellent teaching advice. You got to get to know your students. So the things that the CTC are asking these folks to do is just good teaching. And we want them in the habit and practice of doing this. And through induction at RCOE, we talk about Linda Darling Hammond's The Bridge into the Profession. You know, you were holding their hand for the year or two where they're learning to think like a teacher. And that's all this is. And I would tell my students that you are a good teacher. They want you to show it. They want you to show that you know how to think like a teacher and respond like a teacher. So consider every aspect of your students' lives with these funds of knowledge. We're talking about travel, how they get to school and back, what language they speak, their culture, include the neighborhood, include the geography. You know, they say geology rocks, but geography is where it's at. You were waiting for a dad joke, weren't you? So any nuance of your student's life can be used as some kind of ammunition or rationale for your approach, and in your writing that you do know your students. Embed that in your lesson plan and your pedagogy. And when it's time to film, the reasons why, you know, that you've grouped students the way you have, the way you talk to students, the way you do, the way you phrase questions, these all have to do with who they are. And even popular culture. still not sure if it's safe to talk about Bruno yet, but we beat the heck out of that. I think it's important also for folks to understand what that funds of knowledge, where it came from. And that's Dr. Luis Moll in the late 80s. And Zoltan tells a much better story. But my version is a young man who would take farm produce and go to LA for farmer's market every weekend. And he had a little trouble in math in school, and the parents were called in conference, and the teacher said, "I'm sorry, your son's just not very good at math." And they had to laugh at him because their son was going to LA every weekend making money. He knew discounts, he knew percentages. This was a young man who knew his math. He was just bored in school with the teacher's math. And that's what funds of knowledge is all about. What are they bringing from home? What have they learned? What has their culture provided them? And the more you know, the better off you're going to be. And we'll go into a few more details there, hopefully when we get into the resources. But, you know, tap into everybody, the resource teacher, the lunch lady, the yard supervisor, anything they can give you about these students is gold. They talk about self-assessment and things like that. You can help them with a 3-sort protocol in different ways. Grading is a big topic to go over with your candidates. Again, we've got to pare it down to where they're going to be a better teacher faster, and they're going to be able to knock out this CalTPA. I highly recommend Karen Escalante's lesson plan. I do have it embedded in the resources. There may be a newer version. She is amazing, and that lesson plan reminds them of every little detail they need. So highly recommend you use that. And then GoReact. We use GoReact at RCOE, and it's phenomenal. For you can, we set it up so that our coaches, our induction coaches, turn in coach videos, conversation clips to us, and then we give them feedback on their coaching. But they can also turn it around and have their candidates load videos for them so they can give feedback on their teaching. I used it in my CalTPA class so that students could leave their videos in there and give each other feedback. So if you haven't experienced GoReact, highly recommend you check it out. Very, very powerful tool and a great way to go for your students. And I'll leave it there. Again, we'll be back to more resources later. Thank you.
The last of the required supports is providing candidates who are not successful with additional support. And unfortunately, this is a hard part. This is a hard conversation. Sometimes it's something as simple as a candidate registered for the wrong version of the assessment and submitted it, and they were unable to score it. And so it's usually a pretty quick fix in some case like that. But really, targeting support to the candidate is an important piece here. Understanding, you know, what they did well, where did we score well? Let's build on that to see what we need to do to move towards that needs improvement and to get the other components up to standard. I think a big thing, candidates get an X or something. They're like, what does this mean? And it's just this, because there's a lot of anxiety, right? We submit this assessment, we're waiting for it. It's 10 o'clock at night when I get my exam results, and I want to celebrate, but I get this weird error code and I don't know what happened, or I didn't score as well as I thought I did. And now I'm just realizing all this work is for nothing and the world is over. And that's not what we're trying to do here. We always want to pass on the first go round and prepare candidates, you know, to do so, but it doesn't always happen. And so understanding, you know, error codes, sometimes it's page limits. I had a candidate who submitted a TPA and it was 7 pages and she turned in like 20 and thought that she was doing the right thing. And I was like, no, they're you got to pay attention to these parameters. They're like the directions there, you know. And in those one-on-one advising sessions where you kind of take a look at what went well and where we need to go, the purpose of that for me and with my program is to give someone some direction so they know where they need to go. The world's not over. This is going to happen and it's going to be okay. But the biggest part is really reflecting on themselves. For when I've talked to candidates who have not met the minimum requirements, I ask them what happened, and they say, well, I just filled out the templates. Well, did you review the rubrics? No, I didn't have time for that. I just filled out the templates. And I say, okay, well, so that's where we need to go. We need to go through and review the rubrics and see what you put into these templates, and allowing candidates to self-assess and review their own work and say, you know, this worked well and this didn't, and I know that this wasn't good. I know that this video didn't have what I needed to have, but I turned it in just because I wanted to check and see if it would pass. But understanding, you know, that one-on-one support, knowing what they need to do to resubmit for the scoring process, is an important part. And it's not necessarily, you know, the happy side of the required responsibilities of a program, but they are critical to ensuring that these folks continue on. And because it would be absolutely terrible for someone to go all the way through and get to this one spot and say, well, I guess I'm not a teacher then, and just give up. Because there are so many different things that can be done to just, and a lot of times it's just a simple misunderstanding on a component. And right now, with the funding that's provided for folks to go through TPAs and CalAPAs and other assessments, it's not as painful as it has been in the past, where they've had to repay for the assessment. So reminding folks of that, that we can, you know, we can do. I tell my sons, you know, these things are tough. I'm not going to be dismissive of any of this work, but we can do tough things. We can do tough things, and we can work on it together.
I like that. We can do tough things. So if you joined us late, we are using the acceptable supports, which is in the materials folder, as our guide today. We started out at the bottom, thou shalt not do these kinds of supports. Then we went up to the top and did the required ones, the things that programs are required to do. And now we're going to move into the suggested supports. These are things you may do or may not do. However, before we go there, Joe, when it's your time next, we're having a lot of questions about why is this folder empty? I want his good stuff. So please address that when you're speaking. And also thank you to Sandy, who already did what we're hoping. I took Karen Escalante's template and I formatted it for special ed. Here it is. Thank you very much for starting that share. So hope that continues. So moving on to, I think Melanie's the first one to go with our acceptable supports.
Yes. So, yeah, this has been a journey. I started 5 years ago with the County Office of Education up in Placer County. And this was the first or the last year, excuse me, of non-consequential with the CalAPA. And so I learned right along with my candidates. I was trying to figure out what the requirements were and what they were trying to accomplish and achieve by engaging with these cycles. And so over the course of that first year, what I found as I was learning as well was I was answering a lot of the same questions 30 and 40 times, because the candidates are moving along at different pace, right? They're all developing in a different direction at different times. And yet the same questions were coming up. And so we pull them back into a, meeting, and we would talk about those common questions and some of the needs that they had. But what evolved for me was the realization that if I created a set of tools that my candidates had access to as part of their resources, we could really keep candidates flowing along and headed on a really good pace to complete any of the 3 cycles. So what I'm going to take you through for the next series of slides are the support tools that I created over the last 5 years. Each time the CTC decides to throw a new version at us, I have to go back in and update with language and make sure that they're up to date. So the ones that I'm sharing today are all aligned with version 6. And Gay, if y'all could do me a favor and not do a version 7 next year, that would be great. We're going to stick with version 6, maybe. It's actually not huge when it comes to the adjustments. So what I'm going to do is I'll start with cycle 1. I'll take you through the tools I've created. You'll notice that from cycle to cycle that I've created the exact same tool but obviously what with the content and the focus of each cycle. And then I've added ones that would best help candidates based on what they were trying to accomplish. So the first one we have there, Xavier, if you could click on cycle 1 submission checklist for me. Thank you so much. We'll see if it'll come up for y'all. The submission checklist is exactly what it says it does. Once a candidate gets through all 4 steps, I was getting a lot of questions of, can you take a look at this and tell me what I'm missing? Well, if I do that, 1, I'm giving them too much information, and 2, I'm doing it 40 times. So we developed this tool called the submission checklist, and step by step, utilizing the rubric as our guide, we created this check sheet that helps the candidate to go through and really proof their own draft. And really making sure that they're hitting those highlights in the rubric area anywhere from 3 to 5. We tell our candidates, this is the portion of the rubric you want to be aiming for. We would love to see you get 4s and 5s, but at a bare minimum, we want you hitting all of those elements at a level 3. So as they utilize this particular tool, the candidate literally just goes step by step, and they ask themselves, did I state the school vision? And did I add things possibly that could be helpful? Like, when was it created? When was it revamped? Who was involved? Those are the details that sometimes they just state the mission, they state the vision, and they don't tell us about how it is incorporated into the culture and climate of their school, and how important it is for them to understand what that vision or mission is as they are developing their cycles. We take them through that they look that it is aligned with the school goals, or is it aligned with the school goals? So all of these, and I'll double check, Sue, I actually went in while they were talking, and I did correct some of the sharing accessibility, but I will double check them for you. So we want to make sure that they're aligned. And so it's just helping them to do some cross-checking between goals and mission and vision so that they can develop a richer response to those, the understanding of cycle 1 and why we want to look for those equity gaps in essence of meeting the school mission or vision that we claim to the public that we are working with. And then of course, we want to ask them, are your folks at school even familiar with the mission and vision, right? I mean, you can have a mission and vision, but if you don't revisit it, if it's not at the core or at the foundation of decision-making and goal setting, then maybe it's not as profound and not as impactful as we hope. Those are things we want candidates to talk about. And then as you continue through, you go into step 2, same type of thing. We're hitting those key elements. I took verbiage straight from the rubric and developed like those questions that they need to ask themselves. What might be a contributing factor? Did you talk about that? Did you discuss that in your response? Just describing the specific contributing factor from the data, helping them realize that you can't just come up with a reason that the equity gap is possibly in existence without referring back to your qualitative and your quantitative data, bringing that back in, using the data from the quantitative and the reasons why, and telling the story from the qualitative. So all of these check marks, right? All of these checkpoints throughout the submission checklist just helps them to go back into their submission, back into their responses, and look to see if they've hit those key elements, if they've hit some of those essential skills that the assessors will be looking for, rather than me repeating myself 40 times and asking them the exact same questions. So if you scroll down to step 3, you've got, it continues down with the same idea. Now we're into okay, so what are the strategies we're going to use, right? Connecting the strategies to the potential contributing factors and drawing that line for them. And then of course, we all know how much our candidates love step 4 and how well they do with reflection. We continually work at that because we get a lot of summary. So this submission checklist really does kind of get them to shift and check themselves. Don't just tell us, are you analyzing? Are you identifying? Yes, there is a place for summary. Absolutely. You've got to tell us a little bit about your experience and a little bit about what you uncovered in the first 3 steps, but how does it impact? We want them to reflect on the impact of how they're thinking, how they're going to work moving forward, and how it applies to their leading in the future. They just take this submission checklist and they simply go step by step, going through the check marks to see if, can I identify it in my own writing? Do I find this in my response? Because if they can't, I tell them, if you come back and there's a box you can't check, you need to go back and think about how and where you're going to put that into your response so that you're actually answering the prompt. So I have one of these for each of the three cycles. We can go back to the slides, please, Xavier. So the next tool that I have for each of the 3 cycles is the cycle 1 prompt support. So Xavier, if you would please click on that for me. Thank you. And I will say on this one, I tell candidates, just so you know ahead of time, I create these different tools with not the expectation that candidates in our program will use all of the tools. If they used all of the tools, I promise you they'll be overwhelmed. And that is obviously not the intent. The reason for all the different tools is think of it more through the UDL lens. I want them to choose the tool that speaks to them. I want them to utilize the tool that is going to support them and help them develop the richest and deeper understanding and experience in the cycle. So for some who are more linear and need that checklist type of thing, the submission checklist is a great tool for them to utilize to cross-check themselves. The prompt support is really helping them to understand the prompt a little more in depth. As we all know, there's some of the language in the prompts that, I mean, and Gay can tell you, I will even email her and go, okay, I'm in cycle 2, and what are they asking again? And so I want to be able to support the candidates without telling them, obviously, what to write or which way to go. So what this tool was developed from, again, me answering the same questions over and over again. So the candidate will read the prompt that I have from their template. And then in the blue box for each of the prompts is simply all the questions I've ever had to ask a candidate. So tell me, when was your vision, mission, or goals created? I didn't tell them I had to add that. I'm just telling them that you might want to investigate that a little further. Has the vision, mission, or goals been revised or updated? Get them to go more than, here's my mission, here's my vision, here's my goals. This is what we operate through at school. They're missing the point. They're missing that analyzation, right? They're missing the investigation and the deeper understanding of those key components that make up the culture and climate of their schools. If your school does not have a specific mission, vision, or goal, because I get that question a lot, we don't have that. We have, pillars. Great. That's still what you're basing your learning on. It's what you want your culture and climate to operate through. So if you don't have that, what do you have? And let's talk about that in this response and tie it back to how it drives decisions and it drives the goal setting at your school site. And then, are the vision, mission, and goals used in setting goals, or are they just something that's posted on a wall? And get them to talk about that. Are they familiar with them? Do they think their teaching staff is familiar with them? All of these things can add a richer layer and better understanding as they start to dive into their data dig when it comes to cycle 1. So Xavier, we won't go through the entire one, but if you just scroll down a little bit, I can just talk a little bit. So I do it for each of the prompts. Here's the prompt. Did you consider this? Here's the prompt. Have you thought about this? They have to do the digging. They have to do the investigation of what does that mean at my school site? What does that mean for our goals? What does that mean for our community, our educational community? And so for each of the prompts, for each of the steps, especially in cycle 1, since it's all written narrative. It's just the questions that I would turn to them and say, yes, but what about? I wonder if, and let them go from there. I will tell you that because I placed the questions here in the prompt support guide, if it's missing when I'm reading through their drafts, if it's missing, I don't ask them again. I gave them that opportunity and I gave them that food for thought. If they're really missing a lot of what I think are components that would better answer the prompt or would take them in the direction of answering the prompt where they're supposed to go, I will guide them to this support tool. As I read through your draft, I'm finding that I want you to pay attention to what the prompts are actually asking you. Go to the prompt support guide, and it will start to unfold for you the direction you need to go. Because otherwise you end up giving them far too much information. And you want to obviously be very careful about that. This is probably the tool that my candidates would say that they use the most, because if nothing else, it helps them understand the prompt a little better. We all know that in cycle 3, we get that lovely prompt. I believe it's prompt number 4, which is really scary that I even know that off the top of my head. But it's the one where they say, what are the implications of the coaching and feedback cycle for your volunteer teacher? And every single time, candidates completely miss the boat on that for whatever reason, that word implications really throws them. But if they use the prompt support guide, now they understand, okay, so what you know about coaching on your site, what you know about feedback on your site, and your volunteer teacher, what do you need to do for them? What do you need to consider for them, right? When you word it like that, they go, got it. And they can give you a really robust answer. So this support tool is probably the one that my candidates choose to use the most. Each of these tools, during our overview of the CalAPA cycle that we're working on, I take them through all of the tools so that they know what to look for, what they know what to expect, and which ones they might want to consider using. Xavier, if you can go back to the slide deck, please. The next one, we don't need to click it open. It just highlights. It's just some reminders about the cycle, about, just how we use our data, really checking to make sure that we organize the content, especially with cycle 1. The newest tool that we just recently developed, because again, I was coming back to candidates when I'm reviewing their drafts, and some of you that are in the thick of cycle 1, a candidate can come up with some really great contributing factors. They're reading their data, they're analyzing that data, and they're starting to see the gap and the possible why. But getting them to match their strategy with the contributing factor, sometimes they completely miss the boat. They come up with these wonderful strategies, but I can't draw the bridge. I can't connect the bridge to which one of the contributing factors they are aligning it to. It says it in the prompt. It's all of what part 3 or step 3 is about, yet for some reason, they treat it in isolation. So if Xavier, if you wouldn't mind clicking on cycle 1 contributing factors and potential strategies work. This is really simple. Like this is about as simple as it gets, gang. But we take this tool and we actually have them do a mock one. We have them take a look at a set of contributing factors, and we have them break it down. So if your contributing factor is listed in step 2, put down when you think about that particular factor. Teachers need more professional development in this particular area. What is your strategy? How are you going to do that? How are you going to meet that need of the first contributing factor so that it can be resolved, that it can be improved, that we can see the growth and change and close that gap? Because this is all about closing that gap. And then we all know step 3, that lovely prompt that asks for that feedback and how it made them shift and adapt their plan, really bringing that in. Here's your factor. Here's the beautiful strategy that you came up with. Now, who are you going to go ask to make sure that you didn't miss something? Why are you asking that person in that group about this plan that you've come up with? And how does it shift your thinking based on what they're telling you, what they've brought to light for you, how they are understanding this implementation of a strategy that you are proposing? What does that feedback tell us? So just having those 3 pieces for every contributing factor: list your factor, what's your solution to that, what's your strategy to tackle that, and what feedback are you shifting to because of the feedback and because of the people you went and talked to. And so we just work on that so that when they actually get into the cycle, they're like, yep, for every factor, I need to have a strategy and I need to go ask somebody about it and get some feedback. So Xavier, if you'll go back to the slide deck, please. And you can go next slide, please. So cycle 2, very similar in design, same exact thing. I've taken all of the steps created from the rubrics, that submission checklist. Same thing, taken for the cycle 2 prompt guide. I've taken each and every one of the prompts and then presented a series of questions for them to consider that they want to see if they can incorporate into their response. And then cycle 2, because it's a little more involved with our communities of practice, we have some additional tools based on some of the questions and feedback I was providing to our candidates. So the first one there is your sentence stem annotation tool. Go ahead and click on that for me. And when it comes up here, so there we go. So again, we get into the annotations, right? These are the key elements that we want to make sure that we engage with, or this candidate wants to engage with during both their, all 3 of their implementation meetings. And yet, for some, especially those coming out of schools or districts that really don't have well-structured or well-designed PLC opportunities, they don't know how to take the conversation. So for each of the video clip annotations, we brainstormed together and came up with potential sentence starters, conversation starters that can get that facilitator, to get that candidate to bring their group into conversation and to really discuss items that will demonstrate the annotations. I really emphasize to my candidates, there are several suggestions per annotation, but by all means, do not try to do all the annotations. You will never get through your content. So that's why there's suggestions. Read through the sentence starters, the sentence stems that would hopefully take your group to cover this annotation during the meeting, but read through them and decide which one sounds more like you, which one feels most natural to you. We don't want you reading them. We don't want this stage, but sometimes you just need to know where to start the conversation to get those folks to become really involved and really high levels of participation in the PLC implementation meetings. So for each of the annotations, we have that suggested list. The hope is that they will, if none of these speak to them, that it will trigger something in them that they can bring that into the conversation. So if, Xavier, if you'll go back to the main slide deck for me, please. Thank you. And then the video and the annotation feedback, if you'll click on that, this is how I provide feedback to my candidates. There we go. So this tool actually does a couple of things to really ensure that they don't miss anything in their, not only their meetings, but in their requirements. So the meeting number, obviously, our candidates just mark which meeting it was. Is this my first meeting? Is this my second meeting or my third implementation meeting? And then because they can only have a certain amount of clips, they also identify which clip number for me. The drop down menu there of the choose one allows them to choose which annotation they believe they're demonstrating. They're going to give me the timestamp of that video clip and then their rationale. So when they finished doing their meetings, they've got which meeting they're talking about. They've got the link to the clip for me to view, which annotation they believe they are covering and demonstrating, and which part of that clip I need to be paying attention to, so that I can identify if I think that they've also hit that annotation. But most importantly for me, I want to read how they're rationalizing it. I want to see what they're doing. My comments are simply very what should I say, vanilla, so to speak. It's consider this, I wonder this, but I never say to them, this is spot on, you have demonstrated this, you've got, I never would do that. I simply say, I believe you have demonstrated the annotation. But this keeps this little worksheet, what this does for the candidate, it ensures that they hit all 3 meetings, that they have a clip that represents each of those annotations, the start and stop time, and that rationale. So when they go to the ePearson site, in most cases, they can literally cut and paste it from this document, and they have it organized. They don't miss a clip. They don't miss an annotation, and they already have their draft of their rationale ready to go, and they can fine tune it from there. I would have to say that probably every one of my candidates uses this particular tool because it keeps them organized, and it ensures that they're hitting the key components that they need to hit. Xavier, if you'll go back to the next, or go back to the presentation, please, and to the next slide, please. And then not going to open all of these because we don't need to, but what I also found is because if you have candidates that don't have well-organized or well-structured PLC meetings, or maybe they don't have PLC groups or communities of practice on their campus, they don't have agendas, and they don't have minutes or meeting notes. Because they're required to upload those to as part of their ePearson submissions, this PLC meeting agendas and minutes template is just that. It is a form that I created that helps them keep their agenda organized, as well as a place for them to record all the good content from their meeting, so that when the time comes for them to submit, they have them all completed and they can just go ahead and submit. They share it with their group. They utilize it all throughout the cycle, but it's just an organizational tool, especially if you are at a district or a school site that doesn't practice in PLCs in the same way. I don't require them to use this. It's just there for their convenience and for their organization if they need it. And then just noting there, because I get this question a lot, the way I designed the template is the agendas on the left and the meeting notes are on the right. I tell my candidates, so that there is no confusion and no misrepresentation, I tell them, upload those minute or the agenda, do the document twice, one with just the agenda and then one with the agenda and the minutes next to each other, so that there's no confusion or you don't miss actually submitting a key component. And then I don't know why, but they always struggle with the I struggle with the identifying the strategy. They always want to talk about a program, right, or a tool. And it's helping them get refocused on teaching strategies. There's a couple of helpful documents or helpful articles that talk about good, strong teaching strategies that they can use with their groups as they're developing their plan of action for this cycle. So those are just some resources I provide them so they can get the language and the verbiage that they're looking for. Next slide, please.
And Mel, you have about 2 more minutes.
Got it. Okay, so then for cycle 3, again, there's your submission checklist. There is your prompt guide. And then you have your, again, sentence stems that can start the conversation with that teacher in the coaching cycle for your pre-observation sentence stems and your post-observation sentence stems. So just so they can cover those annotations, they can make sure that they're bringing that into their conversation. And then next slide, please. And then same type of worksheet. I have one for the post and pre-observation videos. They can put in their clip, they can put in their annotation and their rationale and their timestamp, so that when they're ready to go, they have it all organized and they can cut and paste in. And then there's observation notes template, because not everybody has an observation template to use. Sorry, my phone is ringing. And then you have your lesson plan template, because not all schools require a lesson plan template. So there you go. Those are the resources for the CalAPA.
Thank you so much. And Joe.
Wow. So that was a lot. Melody, that was amazing. Your materials are fantastic. Thank you. Everybody take a big stretch, deep breath. We are here to do good things. So there's no sense in stressing. All right, I'm going to move through this, and I'm a scatterbrain, and when I collect materials, and Gay has seen what happens when I try to collect materials, it's very colorful and very long. So full props before I go any further to Jamie Baiza in my office, who helped me organize all of this. And please feel free to steal it, grab it, add to it, whatever you need to do. But there really is a lot of good things on here that I use both at the university and at RCOE. So along the lines of no stress, Stoic wisdom says that you should not concern yourself with things that are out of your control. Yeah, easier said than done, but it is true. Now, chances are you already hold a valid California teaching credential, and you do not need to, nor can you, do this for them. You're going to have some difficult folks, and you got to work around it. You got to work through it. Please don't get any on you, if you know what I mean. Be good to you as well. It can be very, very frustrating. You can only do so much. That's why I alluded to earlier that I recommend you first remind them of what this is and the importance of it. The California Teaching Credential is a very powerful document. It can open doors well beyond California. And to bring this credential, they must simply prove that they think and act like a teacher. Remind them they probably already are a good teacher, but this is a chance to document that. The military has boot camp. Lawyers have to pass the bar. New teachers need to provide proof through the CalTPA or the APA that they're ready for the profession. I also made a point of letting them know that feedback is just a request away. You've got to be available for them. That would be my advice. Though we cannot delve into specifics for their submissions, the overarching goal is for them to be a good teacher. So a lot of my feedback wasn't necessarily TPA specific. We encourage best practices for the profession on a grand scale, and especially for these folks. Remember, every teacher is unique, and we need to have them bloom where they're planted. We want retention. We want them to come back. I preached growth mindset to help them envision what it would be like to have that clear credential and to have that classroom of their own. Have them visualize your own classroom. What do you see? And remember, growth mindset from Dr. Carol Dweck at Stanford is predicated on targeted feedback. And that's really what this is all about. It's a feedback loop for continuous improvement.
Joe, I apologize to interrupt. I just want to make sure that whatever is displaying for the slides is corresponding with what you're covering. And are we on the correct slide? I see that we're resources in 3, and maybe we've seen this slide before.
We have seen this. That was my placeholder, and that's where the resources are.
Okay.
And,
carry on.
Yeah, thank you for checking, Xavier.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I skipped a slide for you earlier, and I want to make sure that I don't do that again. Great.
Nope, no worries, no worries. I just wanted to remind folks that this is all here. They're able to use it, steal it, add to it. But there are some great things in here, including Karen's lesson plan. Again, highly recommend that under lesson planning. Funds of knowledge, we covered the history of that, and I think it's important students understand why we do that and where it came from. And it should be assets based. Don't forget to consider geographic area. I had one student who wrote to the fact that she had a daycare center right across the street from the school, and how the kids would pick up their little brothers and sisters and things like that. That's funds of knowledge. You're writing to that. And also, there's a great resource on there that Jamie added from PBS on what funds of knowledge is and how it works. So that's another good link for you there. The cultural and linguistic resources also are very, very powerful and applicable. You're looking at their communication styles. Are they bilingual? Do they talk slowly? Maybe they don't get to talk at home. These are all little things you're looking to learn about your students. And then, again, this is good teaching. This is not just the CTC. When you're teaching people, you want to know who they are and where they're coming from. I have some things on there on Latino culture and that collectivist bent that many cultures seem to have, that counterintuitive to the American way, I guess, pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps. But when you do group work and your students are Latino, it's kind of an automatic. You should note that, have your students note that. Collectivist cultures leans toward that. The depth of knowledge is on there. Of course, I think everyone's seen that, but not all of our new teachers have, and it's worthwhile. I think Marissa was talking about the verbs that you use. Very important, especially in your lesson planning. That depth of knowledge chart will give you a lot of good ideas there. You want to find other opportunities to learn about your students. I mentioned earlier the yard supervisor, the resource teacher, PE teacher. Maybe you have a fun Friday quiz. We actually developed a few of those in class that we could use to get to know your students quickly. Exit ticket out the door. Maybe you learn something about your students. And have them be strategic about that. Ask kids if they've ever traveled, if they've ever been on a plane. How many books do you have at home? Those are loaded questions, but it'll tell you a lot about who your kids are. I love interactive journals. I wish we had the time. We overload teachers. There's just way too much to do. My favorite coach, Elena Aguilar, Coaching for Equity, says the one thing we all need to do is to slow the expletive down. We do need to slow it down. And I do preach no stress, so I can't really live it that way. I recommend you get some, maybe some retired folks in the community to be hosts and maybe do interactive journals with their students. Again, I get off on good teaching. This is not a TPA, and I'm sorry. I will revert back. Could we try that next slide, Xavier? All right, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor here. Go to the next slide, and we're going to come back to this one. Okay, so when I told you that I highly recommend your candidates have a partner or a triad, this is the activity that they're going to do. And again, level 3, as we've already established, is what we're looking for. Remind them of ands and ors. Those are really important little words in there. So highly recommend they number the tasks, number them so they're identified. Some of them may have more than one task involved. You may want to find your own system. And then their partner or triad partner goes back in there, and you see on the right where it says B and C, that's them finding it. Did they find what the candidate claims they embedded? And are they going to get a level 3? Are they covering all the bases? So I highly recommend you have them map it back and take care of each other. Now, I'm from northern Minnesota, so I'm considered an English learner. Those focus students are really important. And yes, it's cycle 1. But listen, cycle 2, you still want to prove that you know your students. And even though they're not focused students, they are a focus of your class. So one thing, I would be remiss if I didn't say this right away, because I haven't heard it yet, but the CTC support hours are amazing. Send your candidates there. And you need to go if you haven't gone on Thursday mornings every other week. Cassandra, Zoltan, it's just wonderful stuff. Couple other quick tips. Filming has become a lot easier. You used to have to go rent out a camera. Now it can be done on your phone. I mentioned GoReact. You can film it right on GoReact. Best if they have someone follow them and record the conversations, the higher order thinking questions, your leading clarifying questions, things like that. Best if they can be heard and hear what the student is saying. Use that airplane mode if you're filming on your phone, because you get to the middle of that 5-minute clip that's going to be golden and somebody calls you. It's kind of a bummer. All right, I think if we can go back to, there you go. So this is a little activity, and I'll put it in the chat. But in UDL fashion, do not feel obligated. So I don't know, Xavier, if you could just watch and make sure that 4 folks get into each room. If you don't want to go, that's okay. So as a UDL exercise, you're welcome to stay here in the main room. You can check out all the resources that provided, not just mine, anyone that you would like. You might want to check your emails, I'm not sure. You can review what's been covered by Melody and Marissa, great stuff. Or you can just take a break and breathe for a moment. But I'm putting this in the chat right now. It's called Pass the Chips, Please, and you each have chips. So whatever room number is yours, I'm gonna ask Xavier to put you in some breakout rooms of 4. And when you get in there, it's kind of a game of never have you ever, or never have I ever. So the first person might say, have you ever been to the Grand Canyon? Because they have. Well, if nobody else has, then they're ahead because they get that chip, they move that chip. Oh no, I'm sorry. Everybody has to give them a chip. If you haven't been to the Grand Canyon, you have to give the person who brought that topic up, who's been there, one of your chips. So then the next person goes, how many have ever been to Greece? If you're the only one, then you get chips from everyone. It's just a great way to get to know each other. A fun way to get your candidates to know each other before they work together. And a great little game for them to have their students play just to get to know their students better. So let's set the timer for about 6 minutes. And Xavier, if you could send us out or not, and we'll reconnoiter back here in 6 minutes. And I have a few more things to go over with you. Thank you. Oh, any questions? Take that as a hard no.
Gay or Cassandra, I may not be the meeting host, so I don't see the option for me to create the breakouts, unfortunately. If you go to yours, do you see the breakout option under more?
Hey, you know what? We don't really have to do it, Gay. That's okay if it's a hassle. I think I described it fairly well. They have access to it. They can look through it now. If you'd like them to give it a try, but no stress either way.
First, I'm doing it. Breakout rooms. I want 4 of them. They want to put them all into. Add room, add room, add room. There we go. I think I did it. I created the rooms. There's 4 rooms out of 48 participants. How do I have them?
Receive a prompt to go in a room.
Anybody receive a prompt yet?
I declined it so I can stay in here with you guys, but I believe others should have gotten that prompt as well. Thank you, Gay.
Yes.
Yeah, they're trickling out. They're welcome to stay as well.
So there's like 30 people in the room. Is it supposed to be that many?
Oh no, it's supposed to be 4 people to a room.
Okay.
Oh,
We were thinking
4 rooms, so I didn't vote. We'll try this again. Try to get that stuff off of his shoes. Oh God.
We had a big group, so we needed to be restructured into smaller groups.
That's what I'm doing, but you can only close it and it takes a minute to close it, so I'm stuck.
Apologies for the extra stress, Gay.
That's okay. They're down to 40 seconds.
Okay.
Room, add room, add room, add room, add room. Okay, now we have 12 rooms.
Yeah, 3 or 4 in a room's good.
Okay, so now there's 12 rooms to choose from, and now we'll try it again.
I've been invited back to the same room I left a minute ago.
You're just lucky, I hope. But I,
You can never go home again, Marvin. We can give it up, Gay. No stress.
okay. They're gonna be back, everyone will be back in 60 seconds, it says.
Agreed. You bet. You can give that a try with friends and relatives. How's that? There you go.
We didn't have
My
enough
favorite holiday.
salsa.
Stay grateful. Are we all back, Gay? I see 40. Is that right?
It's probably about where we are. It was 48 when I
Alrighty.
all back, so.
Okay. I just put the link in the chat again to the resources. And Xavier, would you be able to bring that up for us, please?
Boy.
So through all of this, I've been doing this for a few years now, and it's interesting to me. I learned how education changes and how the CTC, when they get a hold of good ideas and they decide that they are best practices and we are going to implement them, they show up on the CalTPA. There was no UDL on there when I started, I'll tell you that. And UDL showed up one day on a 5. If you want to get a 5, you apply to UDL. Well, guess what? It's moved over now, and it's a 3, and you are expected to use it. And that's how this big ship gets steered. But just keep in mind and keep your candidates in mind that these are best teaching practices. This is how we want you to teach. There's still a lot of latitude, and you can still have a lot of fun in education. And I do want you to stress that. So these are the resources. And yeah, if you could scroll down, basic stuff. That UDL goal book is golden. That will give, yeah, if you want to open that. This has, oh geez. You know, our motto, Gay, any idiot can have a good day. So I'm going to make this work. So anyway, the UDL goal book, it has so many different strategies that these teachers are probably already using. So they can, again, map backwards, find those strategies in the goal book, and it'll tell them exactly how that applies as a UDL. I've done a little bit of work with Katie Novak. If you know, her UDL work is spectacular. And she actually created a document for us for rubric 1.1, but we weren't comfortable using it because it was version 4. And if you want that or any other, I've got a ton of resources. They just aren't pretty. You're welcome to email me, and I'll put my email in the chat for you here. I do have a little bit of gold there where it says student exemplars. That's exactly what they are, and your candidates will be very happy to see them. This is what my candidates appreciated the most. And these folks did an amazing job, and they're welcome to share because they knew how stressful it was. Yeah, Goalbook is free, Debbie. Yeah. I don't know if there's a paid version, but you can get what you need there. And we also do some really good work on universal design with Dr. Molly McCabe here at Riverside County Office of Ed. And then that's Karen's, now that iteration, full transparency, I do not teach at Cal State San Bernardino. I've opted to coach hockey. So I'm working, I have a women's team. I have 12-year-olds and I have beginners, and that's my new classroom. I'm enjoying that. If you could keep scrolling there, Xavier, there's some really good funds of knowledge stuff there for you. Yeah, you don't have to open any of it though. I'll just let you peruse all this on your own. Maybe just give you a few minutes of open study. But if you could scroll down a little bit more there. There's some stuff on higher order thinking. The Austin's butterfly at the bottom there, I got that from Zoltan. That's really good stuff. If you don't know what higher order thinking looks like in first grade, this is brilliant, really well done. And then I really enjoyed from Edutopia that 60-second strategy of rapid review. That might be applicable to review and to some of the things that they're filming. I guess keep scrolling down, and then I can't push Go React enough. I don't work for them, but I certainly appreciate the tool and highly recommend that you use that. And that additional resources, please hang on to this link. I'll be adding more things to that. And again, props to well, she's not a doctor yet, to Jamie Baeza, who is a professor at UMass Global. She does teach CalTPA as well. And again, she's very instrumental in making this presentable or palatable to you. Any questions on this document? Or if you can go back to, go ahead.
We also have questions at the end of Marissa's. So if the one comes up, you'll have another opportunity to ask him as well. Sorry, Joe, I stepped on your voice.
No worries. And you can, yeah, and again, Go React. And I will just leave the rest of, I will yield my time, Gay, to anybody who wants to peruse the materials and ask questions as you go, or we can, like she said, catch them at the end. But I would like to thank you, and I'm grateful for your work, because this, like I said, can be so stressful for young teachers. And I don't want to say unnecessarily so, because anything worth having is worth working for. But this is a new generation. They work in a different way. So be patient, be kind, and again, just really appreciate what you do. I think this the most important work in education is getting new teachers off the ground. So thank you.
And new administrators.
Amen. Well, yeah, who's going to guide them? Yeah, I'm sorry, that was implied, Gay. So
Okay.
yes.
Okay. So now we're going to turn to Marissa, who has worked with both general ed as well as ed specialist TPA, and is on has been currently serving on our literacy design team. So has a lot to share with us for what she has done with her program. Marissa.
All right, thank you, Gay. I put together just kind of a list of stuff as I was sitting down thinking about stuff that I've heard over the years working with TPA. One thing that when working with instructors, big shout out to UC Merced. That's where I started this work and have shifted over to the County Office of Education. But working with instructors and faculty over at the UC, embedding the TPA into methods courses or practicum courses is kind of where it fit for us when we were in that space. And looking at the assignments that are similar and say, is it something that we can take out and replace with TPA, so that way we're not overloading some of these folks. I came into teacher preparation in 2019, 2020, and I very much so remember getting that letter from my son's school on Friday the 13th saying, now we're going to shut the school down for a couple of weeks and see how this COVID thing pans out. And so in preparing candidates for the classroom during a pandemic and during one of the most stressful times arguably in education, we've had to pare down some of these things and make them more valid and more useful. And especially now in my role working with intern teachers, we have to balance program standards with very tired interns and very, very stressed out people. But we still need to make sure that we're holding up high standards, because the children of California deserve this, and they deserve the best teachers that we can put out. And using the TPA models in more than one place can help guide instruction in our classrooms, at our universities and county offices of education, but also to, like I said, if there's an assignment that's a signature assignment or something that's in a class that can be maybe pushed aside and this can be put in, that can do a lot for a candidate. So they're not having to do two very alike assignments. When teaching, one thing that I found helpful for candidates is to go through the steps in the process, discuss the template that they are working on or the step that they're working on, and then give the candidates some time in class to go and work with someone and talk about it. What do we understand? What did you get from that? What did you get from that? Okay, this is what I got. This is what I understand. And then go take some time and come back to class the next week with it done. And recognize too that, crazy can happen and we aren't able to get these things done, but we want to keep trying to move along at a pace, because if you say something is due in August, you start the class in August and it's due December 14th, sometimes the DUE date, the day before becomes the DO date, right? The due date is the 13th, and it doesn't work that way for these kinds of assessments. So allowing students to work systematically, helping to organize them, it's important. And one tip from a candidate that I got that I thought was actually really interesting, he kept a copy of the templates that he just took his notes on. And he had them as a Google Doc, and he wrote things in and put sticky notes and things like that, and just on this template, and then used another copy of the templates to do his TPA. And so by doing that, he kept all his notes in the right place and was able to fill in his questions and say, on this template, on this place, I had a question on here. And when getting very specific questions like that, it's helpful to be able to point out and see, because what ended up happening is he'd ask a really good specific question and the other candidates were like, yeah, that question, what's the answer to that? And it helped me to be able to target different pieces. So I've given that advice to candidates ever since, because it ended up being a very successful tool for this candidate. And the biggest thing I tell candidates is, if you're bored, they're bored too. Please try to make something fun, engaging, exciting, interesting, different, right? We're doing something that is challenging, but everybody can be challenged and do things in a fun way. We can do something exciting, something seasonal, something that goes with a certain time of year. I had a candidate do a TPA on Veterans Day, and he, as part of his extension, he invited veterans to come in and talk to the students. And I told him, I said, nobody that's going to talk about something that terrible that happened in Vietnam or anything, but truly he was able to bring people in and share this experience and make it exciting and engaging for the kiddos. Because when something's exciting and engaging, you look at the clock and you can't believe that an hour has gone by. But when something's really challenging to focus on, you look at the clock, you're like, wow, it's only been 3 minutes. And so by doing that, you can see the fun in the videos, you can see the fun for the candidate, you can see the passion come through and the excitement, and the reason that we get into teaching is to work with kids and to see those, those light bulbs come on. Supporting candidates and district employed personnel. This often is a challenging space. The cooperating teachers are tired. The administrators are tired. Everybody has been through a lot these past few years. But when we think of an assessment, it's you have two ways of thinking about things, right? You could think about it as an opportunity to show what I know and to show how I grow, or it's a roadblock, or it's a stumbling place, or it's a hoop that we need to jump through, right? And the way that we think about something is so important. If we think about it as a hoop, then it's going to be a hoop. If we think about it as an opportunity, it's going to be an opportunity. And I often tell, especially pre-service candidates, when you go into job interviews and they ask you some of these very specific questions, you have an opportunity here to really get into instruction, to talk about one lesson where you focused on students and how you address their individual needs, or a unit where you used assessment to drive your instructional decisions. And when you have something to speak to that's very specific in this formalized way, your hiring committee is going to be more impressed with what you have to offer, because you have real experience. And so it's important to understand that. And the biggest thing that I hear from cooperating teachers, mentor teachers, I never had to do a TPA. I have no idea how to help this person to do their TPA. But the thing is that everybody's taught, planned, reflected, made adjustments to instruction. The TPA just formalizes that process and organizes it and allows for people to say, okay, yeah, that's what we do. And this is how we do it all the time. So understanding, like I said, that we're coming with, and as a program, we're working with different people from very different perspectives, but we got to get everybody looking the same direction and seeing that this can be a really cool opportunity to do a fun unit with students and to see some really cool outcomes. Next slide, please. So one big thing that I have done with, working through a pandemic, but also we had what Mel described earlier, answering question after question, like the same question multiple times, is creating some asynchronous video supports for candidates. So Xavier, if you wouldn't mind, please click on the first MMSN component there. And hopefully it opens. Okay, thank you. So what oftentimes happens when someone goes to the, to download all the templates is like, whoa. There's like 10 templates and 15 rubrics and 100,000 pages of program assessment guide. Like, I'm supposed to read all this? No, okay, well, here we go. Here is the assessment guide. It's right here. This is the TPA that you're going to work on. Here's some information about the rubrics. And so these links are just to the assessment guide and the actual templates. So now the candidate has them all in one place. And what goes in each section, just a quick little summary. And that way the candidates can kind of see it all. And I provided these here, and it says just link on the side. What I've done in the past is actually clicked on that assessment guide. You don't have to click on the assessment guide, but I share my screen on Zoom, and I usually don't have my picture showing. So that way it doesn't look like a before picture, the ones where after people lose 500 pounds, so I record myself going over this assessment guide and oftentimes reading certain things out loud to folks, calling out specific things that are in a red box or a green box, depending upon what version of the TPA you're looking at. And by doing that, I can ensure that everyone in my program, no matter who their faculty member is, what class they're working on, will get the same information because it's coming from the TPA coordinator. And I make the videos once a year because these things there are iterative changes every year. And it's important to make sure you remind candidates, you should be looking at this version. It should say this at the bottom. You're on the right thing. Okay, let's go. And by going through and just pointing out the important parts, now you have a 30-minute video for the assessment guide because it's kind of long, but somebody can watch it and they can watch it more than once. And they can go back to it. And they can pause it and then look at something and think about it and then go back to it. And by having that kind of asynchronous guidance, it allows for folks to be able to work in their own time and in their own space. I'm going to talk about the rubric breakdown again, but in the next piece. But the rubrics are such a important component of this assessment. It's how we're being scored. But a lot of times, it's overwhelming to see so many rubrics that they go with different things, and it's challenging for the candidates. So to be able to discuss that in a video where you just give, here's your rubrics, this is what this means, pay attention to this. And again, it's an asynchronous component. The candidates can go back to it, listen to the video. For each one of the parts in step 1 plan, because in CalTPA, 1, those are, the big meat of the assessment, the heavy lift. And so having just a quick video, maybe 3 to 5 minutes, where you go over a blank copy of that template and describe what it is that we're asking folks to do in this section, it could be very, very helpful. And I've had candidates tell me, well, what I do is when I'm going to work on, part A, I watch the little video clip and you describe the instructions. And so then I pause it and then I do it. And then I go back and I push play again. And then I listen and then I pause it and then I do it. And so they're able to work along with the instructions in, with my friendly voice, telling them all these things. And they should have your friendly voice. You're their program support people to give them your voice, because that is, that's why they chose your program, because they trust you and they know that you're going to guide them appropriately. Then the teach and assess, reflect, apply, again, same kind of deal. Quick little video to describe what's happening in that section, so that way the candidate is able to work along with. And then also sometimes folks work out of order in some of these pieces. Maybe they want to look at the teach and assess first before they look at plan. It's not always the best way, but sometimes we want to look at it all in one chunk, or sometimes people can't handle that and they need to chunk it out. So by breaking it out in this one page, friendly colors, nice little quick videos, it allows for folks to be able to get through the material and get on their way to the assessment. If we could go back to the presentation, please. Those are embedded for both CalTPA, EdSpCalTPA 1 and 2, for mild, moderate support needs and extensive support needs. If we could, please click on the rubric breakdown and peer self-assessment, mild, moderate support needs. Okay, what I did here is it's literally a Google Doc with screenshots of the rubrics. And I kind of got them in as tight as I could to put them together, so that way you could see step 1 plan. And if you scroll down, this is based on a level 3, where each one of the constructs is now converted into a question. So if the first construct is about the lesson plan, does it include the manageable goals? If so, how? And so the candidates can go through their learning segment template, or whatever it is that's the evidence for the part of the rubric, and they can include that in that little box. So when they're working with that partner that was suggested, they're working with their cooperating teacher or mentor, or a friend, if they're going through this, they can ask each other that question. Well, what does it mean? What do you think? Is it manageable? Is it manageable to learn this part in this one class period, or should it be broken up? And they can have that conversation with that district employed supervisor, because this is not, it's the CalTPA, right? But it's not the TPA, it's a question. And we can look at this, and without any training about the TPA, we can answer this question. And so by taking each of these constructs, like I said, breaking them down, understanding that these are analytic rubrics, we got to do all of this stuff. It all has to be here to get a 3. And so by breaking it down and looking at, because sometimes they're a little bit deceptive to me, it was, because it's asking for a few different things in a small space. And there was a quick question in the chat. I do have some videos. They're ones that I have made. I can share them. I just didn't include the videos there because I really think I actually kind of feel strongly but I can share videos. They won't want to hear my voice. They don't know who I am. They want to hear you as their instructors, to make those quick little videos. And so that's part of why I didn't post them. And then also, the whole, I sound like Kermit the Frog here sometimes in my videos, and I didn't want to necessarily share that piece. But so yeah. My email is I think we'll have it at the end, or let me see if I can just put it in here. So yeah. So if you continue to scroll down all the way through the CalTPA, it's all of the rubrics. I went through and did this. But one thing that I have done in the past when teaching this is, instead of just giving them this response, I have the candidates, work in partners or groups to break down the constructs and see how closely they get aligned to what I found or I felt the constructs were. And so that is a way to get folks to read the rubric and to really get involved with the rubric language and understand that the rubric is there as a guidance tool to help them out. If we could go back to the slide. The bottom there, the support for new faculty, site-based administrators and site-based mentors. If you could please click on that link. So when we do our 10-hour training modules for district employed supervisors, we do a lot of our training synchronously via Zoom or in person, but we also do use some asynchronous tools. And if you would scroll down, please. I believe the ones that I have on here are for the multiple subjects TPAs, but if you look there are some presentations on the CalTPA 1 and 2. And those are just very quick kind of like overview documents about the TPA 1 and 2. So that way, this is what you have to know. This is what you should know about a TPA. So if you wouldn't mind clicking on CalTPA 1 or 2 presentation, either one is fine. So again, this is multiple subject candidates. And all I did here was just pull out, what folks absolutely should know about the TPA, and just one presentation that's going to take about, 45 minutes for cooperating teachers and administrators to listen to, so they can get an overview of, there's 4 steps. They plan, they teach and assess, they have to record, they reflect, they apply, and understanding that cycle. So that way they're able to assist the candidates in any way that they're able to. So I just wanted to share that. If we could go back to the presentation. In the next slide, please. I actually did the same kind of things for the asynchronous video support for the extensive support needs folks. Same deal for the rubric breakdown and the orientation for site-based administrators. So if you wouldn't mind clicking on the extensive support needs link in the asynchronous video supports. Thank you. So again, it's just the same table where I linked in the current assessment guide, linked in current versions of the templates. If there's no link, that's a clear indication to the candidate that there's no template in that space, but it's still a major component part of that step. I included the rubric breakdown for CalTPA 2 extensive support needs. When you click through that, it'll take you to the screenshots of the rubrics and the questions that guide through the constructs, in order to, like I said, allow for that asynchronous time to work in your own time, in your own space, and to do a lot of self-assessment. This is not what I don't just hand these to candidates and say, here, teach yourself. We definitely work through and teach with candidates, but this is something that I put before I even start, put at the top of a resource module for candidates and say, it would behoove you greatly to go through and just listen to these videos, because when you start listening to me and we're starting to work along with this, you'll have much better questions and much better concerns addressed if you have some background information as to what we're talking about. And so, like I said, this is an asynchronous support. And then I also do shoot these out to my faculty members as well. So that way they have the most up-to-date templates and information and videos and video supports that they can provide to candidates, especially for, onboarding new folks who may not have the deepest understanding of the CalTPA. We'll go back to the main presentation. I think I'm seeing in the chat that there might be materials that are not in the folder. I can add these materials to the folder. I just embedded them into the presentation. My apologies if anybody is having a challenge accessing them, but I did want to kind of stop out because I know that we wanted to make sure there was space for questions.
Thank you so much, Marissa and Joe and Melody. We have really appreciated your time, your expertise, your willingness to share what your blood, sweat, and tears. And as I expected, that's just a wealth of information. But we know we have an awesome field out there, and you might have some other great tools as well. So we wanted to spend a few minutes with questions for any of our speakers. Perhaps you have best practices to share. As we said earlier, Shannon posted a couple of times for us. She's taken Karen Escalante's template and altered it for special education. Perhaps you have a suggestion for some of the things you have seen, or do you have a need, something that you're looking for that perhaps this community of practice amongst ourselves would be able to help with. So if you would like to unmute yourself and ask a question or share a practice, suggestion, or need, please do so. Joe, in our chat, there's another question about your materials. Do you want to share again how you have them so that they can access the things that you shared?
Yes, apologies.
Hi, thank you all for sharing. I'm from Cal State Fullerton, Rosalinda Larios, assistant professor, and kind of going to Marissa's point of our mentor teachers not having previous experience with the TPAs themselves because they're new to special education. What we did at Cal State Fullerton was draft up a letter from all of the coordinators within the department, and it's on a Google form. So candidates work on developing a timeline. And then when they start their placements, they are to share their timeline for cycles 1 and 2, as well as the letter, talk through the letter with their mentor teacher. And then the mentor teacher signs it, lets us know if they have any questions about the TPAs. And then I get their email address. So then later in the semester, I can follow up with all of the mentor teachers, thank them for their support with our candidates, and assure them that they can always reach out to us if they have questions. So I think so far that's working out nicely for us.
And I don't know if the Rosalinda is part of it, but I know at the Meredith Fellows Implementation Conference, Cal State Fullerton shared how they keep each other in the loop as coordinators of each of the different performance assessments.
Yes, I was part of that group.
Yeah, great idea. You know, you're not alone. You're not the sole little Linden in camp. So it has been very helpful. Anyone else, something to share?
Well, I would like to, I'm asking for help.
That's great. That's
but first of all thank you, Gay. First of all, I just want to thank you, all the presenters, and of course the department for putting this together. I have various hats, and one of them is being a CalTPA coordinator. Oh, I'm Lupe Olguinbio. I'm from San Diego State University with the Department of Dual Language and English Language Learner. We're the ones who train bilingual student teachers, and multiple subject and single subject. So here's my help. Or your suggestions really is, I want to have wraparound support for our student candidates from all the other faculty in our department. And so I want to be able to perhaps look at their syllabus or the syllabi and see, like was mentioned earlier, which assignments they're doing that are similar to TPA. But I'm trying to get them all to understand how each of them have a role in preparing our students in the process of being good teachers, right? That the CalTPA measures. So I don't know, any suggestions for me? I would like a lifeline here at this point. Thank you. Ideas? Where do I start? I started by setting up a faculty retreat on CalTPA and just for them to really understand the vocabulary of CalTPA, but really to look at, you know, those concepts, those skills, you know, the funds of knowledge. I mean, all of those pieces are so critical. And so, anyway, so I am going to be looking at your materials and see if I can somehow, you know, put something together. So that would be really helpful. So I'm going to reach out to you, Marissa, so look out for an email from me and also Joe, because we have CalTPA. I don't have CalAPA, but yeah, we'll be reaching out. Okay.
For
So-
sure, reach out. And I've been, you know, when I was part of the UC system, and you know, some folks were doing EdTPA, some folks were doing CalTPA, and getting folks to share materials sometimes can be a bit intimidating, especially to share out a syllabus or even sequence of materials, because you know, there's a lot to that. But maybe something to do might be, as the CalTPA coordinator, maybe sending out like a suggestion of ways that things can be taught, and then say, well, what do you all think? How can you add to this so we can have a greater understanding? And maybe putting yourself out there first, because sometimes being the first one to do something is the most challenging. But if you say, this is how I'm doing this, and I really want to make sure that I'm serving the students in the best way that we can you all work with me so we can just build capacity within our own group? And also happy to share how we teach TPAs in our programs, and so that way you can see outside of your institution as well, and be able to share some of those materials with folks in your space.
Okay. Good.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you. I think just to get the dialogue started about it, right? Yeah.
And
Okay.
I would suggest that that's what's going to make a good program, a great program, to get everyone on board. But
Okay.
it's going to be an easy lift.
Yeah.
And make sure you check out the chat. Raymond shared his email with you. Some other folks there to help you with some ideas.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you so much. This has just been so helpful. Thank you.
Another thing, Lupe, that we did is we had a little fun with it, and we tried to come up with as many different TPAs as we could. What does TPA stand for? And we made fun of the initials, and I think that helped them to feel a little bit better about it. And when you laugh together and you have a good time together, then you know who you want to work with and who your partner's going to be.
Yeah. Yes. And then the other thing I've been asked to do also is to prepare or not to prepare, but to add to the skills of our supervisors, you know, out at the sites, which is another mountain to climb. But I'm feeling much better now that I have some good practices that you've shared and some wonderful links. So I'm feeling much better. So thank you for that. And I do have a question for you, Gay. Has there been a discussion about making the templates in Spanish for the world language single subject teacher candidates?
And that would be a Zoltan question, and he has not been able to join us today, but I will write it down and ask him to get back to you.
Great, thank you.
I have a question as well. So I took over as our TPA coordinator this year, and what I'm finding is that the way that we're currently offering our TPA support really is not working. So we have an outside expert that we contract with who comes in and does an overview meeting, and then that's kind of it, and it's up to the candidate. So we're in talks about, you know, creating a course for next year, things we can do in the meantime. So if anyone has any advice about what's been working for their programs, I would love to hear that and get some ideas. So that as we continue this conversation, we have a few different avenues that we could explore.
And Carissa, I'm sorry, I missed your institution. Are you
Kings County Office of Ed.
County office? That's what I was wondering.
Yes.
When I was
So-
previously with the UC, sorry, I think I stepped on somebody, but when I was previously with the UC, we set up a seminar. It was like a 1-unit course that guided candidates through the teacher performance assessments in like a 4 to 6 week kind of sequence, where it was, we go through this one piece, then you do it and come back. We go through this one piece, you do it and come back. And by doing a longer amount of time allowed for folks to work through, because the questions that they have, they won't come up until they actually do the work.
Right.
And so by your idea of creating a course that would support candidates is probably a strong way to start.
Okay, thank you so much.
I was going to share that San Diego County Office of Education. So we do, we started a course that coincides with our practicum supervision course. And so right now it's the same instructor. So I'm practicum supervision and CalTPA. We just morphed us this year. And so we run separate seminars, and we do a similar concept as Marissa was sharing, is that we have different, like each class session that we meet, we go over a different step of whatever cycle we're on. And then we also offer like Saturday workshops for individual questions or clarifications that people need that may not be class-wide or weren't answered specifically within that. And then we have some due dates set up within that course where you got to have it submitted to us so that you're ready to submit it to Pearson, kind of a thing, all at the institution's suggested due date. And so, yeah, we run there are mandatory sessions that you have to go to in terms of instruction around each step. And then there are voluntary sessions that are kind of additional guidance for some of our candidates who may not have on-site mentorship or real strong relationships with their university supervisors or so on, just to give another option for additional support through their institution.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So it's kind of sounding like the course is the way to go. One last question regarding that, because I know we're almost out of time. Are you all doing those on weeknights, on nights that they don't have class, or are they typically on the weekends?
So San Diego County Office, we do them in their course schedule. So they have courses for 2 years, every Tuesday and Thursday, 5 to 8.
Okay.
And so within each of their class segments that they have, right, we've got 6-week courses, 8-week courses, 10-week courses. But the way that the schedule fits in, one of their Tuesday or Thursday classes will be paused that week so that they go to the CalTPA.
Okay.
And so they do it in place of a class session for that course.
Okay.
And then that course, so if it was an 8-week session, that course would actually run 9 weeks because we did one CalTPA session in the midst of that.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so it's worked completely into the master schedule as a required course for them in junction with their practicum supervision.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
As far as remediation has gone, we definitely have built in here at our MCOE and then at UC Merced, we built in those courses to their practicum, but when remediation comes around, folks didn't pass that first time around, there is a separate seminar that runs a separate night of the week that's not included in their courses. We offered usually a section that was on a weekend and then a section that was on a weeknight.
Okay,
but because they were 4-week, 6-week classes, they were short term.
Thanks.
Again, you guys just blow me out of the water. You are so adept at the work that you do, at the community you are building. I really appreciate all of you who have attended, have shared, have asked quality questions, have helped to reach out and support others. Thank you so much for attending. All of our speakers have put their addresses in the chat. So if you, I know the chat will disappear when I close the meeting out, so I'm going to wait a few minutes so you can go into that chat and grab them. But thank you so much for attending. And our next session is in January, and it's going to be spearheaded by someone else, but it is, I think the topics are going to be on the videotaping. So it'll be a really good one. It's a difficult task for some of our candidates. So we'll hope to see you then. but we'll keep you apprised of what's happening. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. It was wonderful. Thank you.